Hey up everyone, hope you're all doing well. Here are 5 fights that happened way too late. And just before we get started, guys, if you love UFC content and love keeping up to date with UFC news, make sure to drop a sub. But anyways, let's get straight into it. To start things off, we have the most recent one on this list. This happened late last year. And honestly, it's such a shame it happened late last year when Stipe is like, what, 500 years old, and Jon Jones is also about 500 years old. Imagine if this had happened about 10 years ago, or maybe like 2017, around that time frame, when Stipe had, got a couple of title defenses. Jon Jones was the king of the light heavyweight division. This could have been a real possibility, and this fight would have been a lot more hyped up. When we actually got to this fight, no one actually gave a toss, considering the whole, Jon Jones, everyone wanting Jon Jones versus Aspinall, Stipe not fighting in about 2 years and coming off a loss to Ngannou. So it was kind of, it was like a bad cloud over this one, a grey cloud over this one. No one really gave a shit. But if this was like, again, 10 years ago, there would have been so much fucking hype for this fight. Stipe with good boxing, good reflex, good reaction timing, mixing to head and body, decent anti-grappling. And then you had Jon Jones, who obviously very well rounded. We all know how it goes, but this would have been very intriguing about 10 years ago, and possibly Stipe could have won this. I still think Jones would have won, by the way, but I definitely think it would have been a lot more closer and a lot more competitive. And it's a massive shame that we got this fight when they're both just completely washed. I'll be completely honest with you. But next up, we have Nate Diaz and Tony Ferguson. Now, this happened in late 2022. Obviously, this wasn't meant to happen. This was short notice. Hamzat was meant to take on Nate Diaz. Fucking hell. And Tony Ferguson was meant to take on, was he Li Jingliang? I can't exactly remember who he was meant to originally fight. But regardless, we got this fight. Main event. It was a stinky fight, I'll be completely honest. But imagine if we had got this when Ferguson was in his prime and Nate Diaz had all this hype around him after the McGregor stuff, like in, 2016? He came back in 2019. Even if we had got this in 2019, 3 years before, this still could have been a lot of hype for this. I think in 2019, Ferguson had only fought once, and that was against Cerrone, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. My vision's a bit blurry. But this still would have got a lot of hype. Ferguson wasn't completely washed back then as well. He still had that nice, good old winning streak. Nate Diaz was coming off that hype over the McGregor fight. You could have built this up a lot. It would have been an absolute barn burner. When it actually came around, this happened on short notice. The welterweight division, Ferguson had already lost several times. Nate Diaz had lost to Leon Edwards and got dominated and pissed on by Leon Edwards and got pissed on by Jorge Masvidal. So both guys kind of lost a lot of momentum, and a lot of the hype was died down out of these two. No one was really expecting much from this fight. But again, 2019... this would have been an absolute fucking banger. The constant pace of both men. The dog in both men. In this one, Ferguson didn't really have much dog. Diaz was better than him, and it was just a shit fest of a fight, which is very unfortunate because I believe this would have been an absolute banger back in there, even like 3 years beforehand. But now we move on to another Diaz. Nick Diaz, and that's the rematch between him and Robbie Lawler. Obviously, their first fight happened, I can't remember when it happened. It was like early 2000s, was it? Maybe mid 2000s. Nick Diaz was able to knock out Robbie Lawler, got in the head and got into the mind games of Robbie Lawler and knocked him out with like a jab as Robbie Lawler came into it. And then the second fight, it was just really sad, wasn't it? Nick Diaz clearly didn't want to be there, came in out of shape. Both guys in the early 40s, late 30s, somewhere around there, both completely washed. So this is, I say, if Nick Diaz didn't get that 5-year suspension from the whole weed thingy, and this happened like 2015, this would have been a fucking banger. The boxing exchanges, both men could go 5 rounds. Both men's got dogs in him. Both men are closer to their prime. Robbie Lawler would have been in his prime. Nick Diaz wouldn't say it was in his prime, but closer to it at the very least, not a decade out. This would have been an absolute banger. A lot of people would have been invested in this fight as well. But unfortunately, what we got was just nothing great, and unmotivated, uninspired Nick Diaz showed up, and unfortunately he did quit as well. No shame to him, but yeah, it's a shame because we could have got a lot better fight out of this if it had happened much sooner. Next up, Kamaru Usman and Khamzat Chimaev. Now, this one may be a tad bit controversial. I'm not entirely sure, but just hear me out. Kamaru Usman, Khamzat happened on short notice in the middleweight division after Kamaru Usman was coming off 2 back-to-back losses over Leon Edwards. Obviously, the headshot dead, and then the third fight as well, where Leon beat him rather comfortably, in my opinion. And then we had Khamzat, who had missed weight for welterweight against Nate Diaz. And did he miss it? Has he missed it twice? Gilbert, he missed it twice, I'm pretty certain. But anyways, he came up to middleweight. And could you imagine my hype if we had gotten this when Kamaru Usman was champion and hadn't had lost, and Khamzat had just steamrolled through Gilbert Burns when he just battered Gilbert Burns? This could have potentially happened if we didn't have Kamaru Usman versus Leon Edwards the second time. We could have had Khamzat versus Kamaru Usman. Could you imagine how much hype this would have generated? 5-round fight, up and coming Khamzat, undefeated, taking on Kamaru Usman, who the last time he had lost was like his second MMA fight or first MMA fight, whatever it had been. It would have generated so much hype. Would the fight have been better? Maybe not. Who knows? I mean, I feel like the fight was okay as it was. Even on short notice, this generated a lot of buzz. I'm not even a massive fan of either of these guys, but I remember just being so hyped for this fight. I remember when both of them entered the octagon, I was like, oh shit, it's about to go down. And yeah, this would have generated so much more hype if it would have happened in the welterweight division when Kamaru Usman was on top and Khamzat was still thriving through the 170 division. Still, I'm not too mad at like what we got. You know, it was a competitive fight and we still got some good moments out of it, but I just feel like this could have generated so much more hype if this has happened back in like Kamaru Usman running the welterweight division. And last but not least, definitely the weakest out of all these selections in my opinion, Aljamain Sterling and Henry Cejudo. Now I say this one because Henry Cejudo obviously retired in 2020. He did that whole thing where he became double champion, came up to the bantamweight division, was able to win the championship, beat Marlon Moraes and got a defense over Dominic Cruz, and then he retired. And at that time frame, Aljo was coming through the rankings, just came off a submission victory over Corey Sandhagen in the first round, was very impressive. And who knows, maybe we could have got a fight between these two. Now, obviously, Piotr Jan comes into the mix because Piotr Jan versus Aljamain Sterling. But regardless, this would have been a very entertaining one, in my opinion. And it happened. Don't get me wrong, we still got a good competitive close fight. But who knows, maybe Cejudo could have won this one if he didn't retire. Just saying, if Cejudo didn't retire and had stuck around in 2020 and we had got this fight, Cejudo may have won this one because it was a very competitive fight. Remember that one? I do believe it was a clear win for Aljo, but regardless, very competitive, very close, and it was a fun, exciting fight. So it's just a shame we never got this back in 2020. Cejudo as well had a bit more aura about him. When he came back, don't get me wrong, he still had a bit of hype behind him, but nowhere near as much as he did back in 2020. Could have sold this a lot better, but regardless, it is a shame we didn't get this back in like 2020, 2021, around that time frame. But guys, let me know in the comments, what are some of the fights that happened too late in your opinion? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.